हरे कृष्ण। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा. So we welcome you all again to part 3 of this course, self-evaluation tools on the path of bhakti. So hopefully we will be able to complete the course in this part. We may extend it for about 10 days and somehow complete this book. But we will not skip any details or discussions, so you need not worry. It's a small book actually, but I have added little extra material from the other books, and that's why it has taken a little longer for us to cover this much portion. Rest of the portions we will complete it in the stipulated time. We will try to complete it in the stipulated time. So, as you all might know that we have been discussing from this book Madhurya Kadambini by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And because we are starting the third part, I will do a very brief recap of the topics that we have covered till now. So, as we saw, Madhurya Kadambini means the cloud bank of nectar. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, which is flowing in the form of the Siddhanta that he has taught to Srila Rupa Goswami, that is compared to the cloud bank of nectar. And each chapters he has divided into individual shower of nectar, Amrita Vrishti. So, Pratama Amrita Vrishti, Dvitiya Amrita Vrishti, like that. So, this book has 8 chapters. The first chapter describes about the super excellence of the path of bhakti over the other paths. The second chapter talks about the stages of Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha and Bhajana Kriya, basically Anishtita Bhajana Kriya or unsteady devotional practice. Third chapter is an elaborate chapter which discusses about Anartha Nivritti, which is what we are discussing currently. And the fourth chapter talks about Nishta, fifth about Ruchi, sixth about Asakti, seventh about Bhava and eighth about Prema. So in this way, the whole book is an elaboration on the 2 verses which of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which describe the 9 stages of bhakti. आदौ श्रद्धा ततः साधु संग अथ भजन क्रियो अथ नर्तन वृत्ति स्यात् ततो निष्ठा रुचिस्तदा तथा शक्तिस्तथा भाव तथा प्रेमाभ्युदंचति. So in this way the 9 stages are described in the 2 verses of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and this book Madhurya Kadambini is an elaboration on these 9 stages. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu itself elaborates in general about sadhana bhakti and then bhava and prema, but the individual stages within the stage of sadhana bhakti, that is it elaborates upon shraddha a little bit, but then the stages within bhajana kriya, then what exactly is nishtha, what is ruchi, what is asakti, these stages are not elaborated, and that is elaborated by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in this book. So, a brief recap of what we have seen till now in this book. In the first chapter, we started with the Mangalacharan, where Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur glorified Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Rupa Goswami. And then he started the book by describing what is the highest understanding of the absolute truth. He establishes that the highest understanding of absolute truth as presented by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also very indirectly indicated in the scriptures is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. The absolute truth as the personification of all the devotional mellows, as a personification of perfect relationships in all the mellows. That is the highest understanding of absolute truth. And then in the third theme we saw that how The Supreme Lord, just like the Supreme Lord is self-manifest and independent, he is not forced by any circumstance or time or people to appear. In the same way, Bhakti also is self-manifest. And in this context, we discussed the theme on how one receives the seed of devotion. So we evaluated various different options, and we tried to see how whether such an option is supported by the Shastras and our practical observation or not. And then we came to the conclusion that one receives the seed of devotion through the intervention of the devotee. One receives the seed of devotion from the heart of the devotee due to the independent will of the devotee. This was the conclusion that we came to. And then in the fourth part, we discussed about how bhakti is not caused by any other process. Even though from a very superficial level, from some statements of the scriptures, it may seem like bhakti is caused by sometimes karma, jnana, like that. But we tried to understand what is the deeper import of such verses, and we came to the right conclusion that bhakti is not caused by any other processes. Therefore, it is called as ahaituki. Rather, it is bhakti that supports all the other processes. Tapasvino, danapara, yashasvino, manasvino, mantravida, sumangala, kshemam na vindanti vinaya darpanam tasmai shubhadra shravase namo namaha. So, we saw that how without bhakti, karma, jnana, yoga, tapasya, any of these things cannot bear any result without the element of bhakti. So, therefore, it is bhakti which supports all the other paths. And such an exalted path of bhakti is not dependent on the purity of the performer or the faith of performer. Both of these are vital factors in practicing any other path like karma, jnana, yoga, etc. But bhakti, despite being such an exalted path, which has the potency to empower all the other paths, but still for its own practice is not dependent either on the purity of the practitioner or even the faith of the practitioner. This we had an elaborate discussion on this theme. Then we saw that how sometimes this bhakti may seem to take a secondary role to the path of karma, jnana or yoga, just like sometimes Vamanadev tends to take as appears as the younger brother of Indra. That does not indicate that Vamanadev is inferior to Indra, either constitutionally or from any other point of view, but he just appeared as the younger brother of Indra just to give him some support. So from that point of view, similarly, bhakti may sometimes appear to take a secondary role to karma, jnana, yoga, as in karma yoga, jnana yoga and ashtanga yoga, but it is only to support that process. And another point, that is the next point, but in this point we saw that how some people say that bhakti is the means to attain the path of jnana. This is also a misconception. Bhakti is not a means to attain jnana. Rather, it is bhakti is completely independent, and bhakti only gives rise to prema. Rather, it is jnana which is dependent on bhakti rather than the other way around. Therefore, considering that bhakti is such an exalted path, a person, despite understanding all these things, if he does not practice this path of bhakti, then he can be considered only as an animal. Kovaina seveta vina naretaram. In this way, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur concludes this first chapter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Pratama Amrita Vrishti. The second shower, which talks about Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha and Anishtita Bhajana Kriya, unsteady devotional practice, he starts by indicating that, actually I did write a book called Aishwarya Kadambini, in which there was some refutation of Mayavad, but this book, even though its name is similar to that book, but the subject matter is totally different. So he says that this book is not talking about Mayavad Khandan, so therefore this is not a sequel to Aishwarya Kadambini, like that he indicates. And then he talks about the two kinds of bhakti, Raganuga and Vaidhi. We went into little elaboration trying to understand what is the definition of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, what is the definition of Raganuga sadhana bhakti. And then we saw that how both this practice of either Vaidhi sadhana or Raganuga sadhana is capable of producing these two effects of Kleshagni and Shubhada. So Klesha, even though means suffering, and in our case it means suffering due to Prarabdha karma and Aprarabdha karma. But the main focus of Madhurya Kadambini is to indicate that that aspect of Klesha which actually causes Prarabdha karma and Aprarabdha karma, which is sinful desires which are caused by sinful vasanas or samskaras. So how bhakti destroys at that level is focused here in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. We had an elaborate discussion on this. And we also saw that bhakti also bestows the second benefit which is Shubhada. Shubhada means bestowal of all divine qualities. Apart from that, it also bestows the happiness, sukha pradatvam. Depending on the level of one's progress of bhakti, bhakti rewards the practitioner with higher and higher levels of happiness, starting with the happiness on the level of Vishaya Sukha, then higher at the stage of Ruchi Asakti, it bestows a happiness which is on the level of liberation, and beyond that at the stage of Bhava and Prema, it bestows a level of happiness which is so extremely condensed that it cannot be compared with anything of this material world, including liberation. Moksha lagutakrit, in fact the bliss of moksha becomes very insignificant. Then as the fifth theme of the second chapter, we discussed the first stage of development of Shraddha, how Shraddha develops through Mahat Kripa, Mahat Seva, Agyata Sukriti, and then by the accumulation of Agyata Sukriti, how the Shraddha develops and how it could develop. That Shraddha could be of two types, Swabhaviki or Balotpadita. We saw this two types of Shraddha. And whichever way one develops that faith in bhakti, whether Swabhaviki or Balotpadita, the natural symptom of that faith is that one feels the need for Sadhu Sangha. And then in Sadhu Sangha, one starts Bhajana Kriya. And this Bhajana Kriya, in the initial stages, because of the anarthas within the heart, is unsteady. Then we had an elaborate discussion about the 6 stages of Anishtita Bhajana Kriya or unsteady devotional practice, starting with Utsahamayi, the stage of false confidence. Then when one crosses that stage, then reality dawns in the form of Ghana Tarala, the stage of thick and thin, serious and lackadaisical practice of bhakti. And then comes the third stage, where the person tries to rectify this mistake by adjusting the external environment. So this is called as Vyuda Vikalpa, where he extensively thinks about how can I adjust my external environment in such a way that I can steadily practice bhakti. So this stage is called as Vyuda Vikalpa. Then after some time he realizes that the real problem is not the external environment, but the real problem is my senses are uncontrolled. So then starts the protracted stage of his struggle with senses, where he sometimes achieves success and sometimes he fails. That is called as Vishaya Sangara. And then once he achieves fairly reasonable control over his senses, then his thought process shifts to how I can positively increase my devotional vows, how I can chant more, how I can hear more, how I can do various other kinds of devotional practices, how I can improve the quality and quantity of that. So he starts thinking in that direction, and he sometimes achieves success and sometimes he achieves failure. So this struggle with achieving success at the stage of maintaining his enhanced devotional vows, that is called as niyama akshama. But after some time, he achieves fairly reasonable success at that stage also. Then he reaches the stage of Tarangarangini, where due to his enhanced ability to control senses and increase his vows, he starts attracting Pujala Pratishta. Then he gets carried away by that name, fame, adoration. So the unsteadiness which is caused due to a person's mind getting carried away by name, fame and adoration, his struggle at that level is called as Tarangarangini. And eventually when he overcomes this stage, then he will reach the stage of Nishta. So in this way we discussed about this 6 stages of Anishtita Bhajana Kriya or unsteady devotional practice, and with this we came to the end of second shower of nectar. Then we start, and before that we concluded that how association of devotees is the only way to overcome this unsteady devotional practice. We had an elaborate discussion on this. And this was the last theme that we discussed before we moved on to the third shower of nectar, which was about Anartha Nivritti. In that we started by seeing what are the different types of anarthas. We identified 4 types of anarthas based on their source. Dushkritotta anarthas are, first we defined what is an anartha. An anartha is an unwanted desire, and a desire which is an obstacle to one's progress in bhakti. Then we saw about the 4 kinds of anarthas based on its sources. One can get unwanted desires due to a past sinful life. One can get unwanted desires due to a past pious life. One can get unwanted desires due to proper practice of bhakti, which is Tarangarangini, Bhaktiyotta anarthas. And one can also get unwanted desires due to a past, due to commission of offences, especially the 10 types of nama parads. So in this way they are called as Dushkritotta anarthas, Sukritotta anarthas, Bhaktiyotta anarthas and Aparadotta anarthas. And then we saw that how offences are not in the category of sins. If unintentionally done, they can be rectified, but sins do not fall in that category. When sins are done unintentionally, also they give reactions, but offences on the part of bhakti, especially the seva aparads, which are inadvertently committed, the moment the person performs sincere devotional service, it is immediately eradicated without the need for him to resort to any kind of karmakandya prayaschitta. So this we saw, and then we started discussing Aparadotta anarthas, and while discussing Aparadotta anarthas, we briefly discussed about 2 Aparadotta anarthas. The first 2 aparads, Nama aparad that we discussed was Vaishnava Ninda. Within Vaishnava Ninda, we discussed a few themes. First we tried to understand what is the potency of a sadhu. Why should one aspire for the association of a sadhu? What is his potency? Then we tried to understand who is a sadhu or a Vaishnava, what is its definition. We saw some primary characteristics and some secondary characteristics. The primary characteristic is Krishnaika Sharanam, that he is always surrendered to Krishna. But there could be secondary characteristics which appear after a reasonable amount of serious practice of bhakti, in the form of compassion, equal vision, tolerance, humility, like that. But we saw that the main reason for sadhu ninda or criticism of a sadhu is because we try to judge a sadhu based on the manifestation or non-manifestation of these secondary qualities, which may take time. It will not immediately manifest. So we do not have firm trust that the practice of bhakti will purify that person. So we end up judging that sadhu. And then we saw the results of sadhuninda, how it hampers one's progress on the path of devotional service. And then we saw that the main cause of this criticism of devotees, why we start looking at their secondary qualities and judging them, is because we have not completely given up our asat sangha. We are still connected with various kinds of non-devotional association. Therefore, this non-devotional association actually acts as the breeding ground for developing an inimical attitude towards the sadhus. And then we discussed about different stages of rectification of this offense, how it is rectified, starting with repentance. And then we discussed that how sadhuninda cannot be avoided in the long run if we do not have an attitude of respect towards living entities. So, how developing a culture of respect actually makes a person immune to sadhuninda. We had an elaborate discussion on this. Then finally we concluded this discussion on sadhuninda by discussing Ramanujacharya's viewpoints on sadhuninda. We discussed those 12 points. He says that a Vaishnava should be very careful to not judge another Vaishnava based on these 12 counts. So that we had an elaborate discussion. So in this way we discussed about this first offense of sadhuninda. Then we discussed the second offense of misunderstanding the position of Vishnu and the demigods. So this we tried to understand by first establishing a gradation of the demigods, especially Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. How Vishnu Tattvas, Vishnu Tattva and Shiva Tattva, Shambhu Tattva are Ishvara Tattvas or controllers, but even within them there is a gradation, because Lord Vishnu is never he never touches the three modes, but the Shambhu Tattva, they comes in touch with the three modes for the purpose of creation, maintenance and destruction. So therefore, compared to the Vishnu Tattva, Shambhu Tattva is little inferior, even though it comes within the realm of Ishvara Chaitanya. And then we saw Brahmaji is a Jivatma only, but a highly empowered Jivatma. So in that sense, he is also an Ishvara. So in this way, the gradation was understood, and we understood that respect should be given according to one's level of development. Sakale samman korite shakati dehonata jata jata tabeto gaibo harinama suke aparada habe hata. This was the theme. Then we also discussed a second basis of bifurcation of these three tattvas, the Jiva Tattva, Shambhu Tattva and Vishnu Tattva. So we saw that Jivas are of two types, the ordinary Jivas and the demigods. The ordinary Jivas have 50 qualities in very minute quantity, but the demigods have those 50 qualities in slightly higher quantity. And Brahmaji has these 50 qualities in still higher quantity. But Lord Shiva and the Vishnu Tattvas, they have these 50 qualities in full. Apart from that, Lord Shiva has and the Vishnu Tattvas have 5 additional qualities also. And only the Vishnu Tattvas have 5 additional qualities, that is 60 qualities. And Lord Shiva has only 55 qualities. But only Krishna we saw has 64 qualities, 4 additional qualities of sweetness, of Venu Madhuri, Bhakta Prema Madhuri, Leela Madhuri and Rupa Madhuri. The sweetness of his form, the sweetness of his sound of the flute, the sweetness of the love of the devotees and the sweetness of Venu, Rupa and Leela, his pastimes. So in this way we established the hierarchy. And based on this hierarchy also, Lord Vishnu should be given appropriate respect, and then Lord Shiva, and then the Brahma and the other demigods, and then comes the regular living entities. Then we also saw other common misunderstandings which have been instigated by the Mayavadi understanding, who say that the Brahman is the absolute understanding of absolute truth. And Brahman, when he comes, takes the 3 modes, then he appears as Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Many such misconceptions we discussed, and we discussed the refutation for those Mayavadi misunderstandings. And finally, Srila Vishwanath Thakur gives very useful instructions for the householders how within their social setup, without trying to hurt the sentiments of the other family members who may not have received the seed of pure devotional service, how they can practice this principle of not committing the second offense. Even though their family members may be attached to worshipping some demigods, how do they do it and in what mood they can act so as to avoid the offenses? He explains this in detail, that we saw. And then we understood an alternative understanding of the second offense. Another understanding of the second offense is to think that the name and Krishna are different, just like, which means to understand Krishna and his name on a material pedestal. Abhinnatvad namanamino. There is no difference between the nama and the nami, but due to our incomplete sambandha gyan, we may try to understand Krishna to be on the same level of the human beings as other human beings. Avajananti mam mooda manushim tanamashritam. So therefore we come to the conclusion that Krishna and his name are actually different. This is another popular misunderstanding. This is an offense. And finally we saw the summary of the second offense, and we also saw ways by which we can rectify if we commit this second offense of either considering Krishna's name to be material or Krishna to be material, or to consider the demigods to be independent of the influence of Krishna. So in this way we completed. This is a brief recap of what we have seen. Because we have started part 3 of this course, I took this time to recap what we have seen till now, and henceforth till the end of this course, at the end of each chapter we will do a very quick recap of that chapter, otherwise we will continue from where we left off. So now the third offense is actually Guror Avagya, or disobeying the order of the spiritual master. That is not discussed in Madhurya Kadambini in detail, or that is not discussed at all. The only other offense that is discussed is Shruti Shastra Ninda, criticism of scriptures. This is one, the only other offense that is described in Madhurya Kadambini. As I promised earlier, we will discuss the rest of the offenses in a different course where that particular theme happens to come. Like say for example, we might discuss the book Harinam Chintamani, where each of these offenses are very elaborately discussed. But for now, this will be the last of the Nama Aparads that we will discuss in this particular course. So criticism of scriptures, Shruti Shastra Ninda. So there is one kind of criticism, as throughout our course we have seen at many places, that as devotees, the only scriptures, the only part of the scriptures that are relevant for our practice are the Bhakti Shastras. So for us, the Dharma Shastras, the Yoga Shastras and the Jnana Shastras are not relevant. We have already seen this. But Shruti Shastra Ninda can happen if a person thinks, oh, these Karma Shastras, Jnana Shastras and Yoga Shastras, they are not useful for anyone. So if one thinks like that, then that is Shruti Shastra Ninda. In fact, that is actually a criticism of Krishna's intelligence. Because Krishna clearly says, Vedescha sarvair ahameva vedyo vedantakrit veda viteva chaham. He says, I am the Vedantakrit, I am the Vedavid, I am the writer of the Shastras, I am the knower of the Shastras. So he very clearly mentions this. So therefore, to say that the Jnana Shastras, the Karma Shastras and the Yoga Shastras are useless, they have no utility for anyone, is actually criticizing the intelligence of Krishna, because he was the one who has compiled all these Shastras. So one extreme is to say only Bhakti Shastras are relevant for everyone, the other Shastras are irrelevant for anyone. This is an offense. This is one extreme. The other extreme is to say Krishna only created all the Shastras. So all the Shastras are relevant for me. So I will read the Karma Shastras also, the Jnana Shastras also, and the Bhakti Shastras also, and I will try to follow all these Shastras. That is a very naive, immature understanding of the Shastras. So these two are two extremes. But our Acharyas explain that while you cannot criticize the Jnana Shastras, Karma Shastras and Yoga Shastras, but at the same time, one should not think that we are meant to practice all these Shastras. As devotees, we should practice only the teachings of the Bhakti Shastras. This is the essence of Vedic scriptures, which is indicated by this verse from the 11th canto. Svesve adhikare yanishta saguna parikirtitah viparyayastu doshasyad ubayor esha nischayah. One should practice those scriptures or follow those scriptures according to their adhikar. Just as if you go to a bookshop and you tell him, can you give me an NCERT physics book? What is the first question you will ask? You will ask, for which class, for which grade, for which standard? Because there is 7th grade NCERT physics textbook, there is 8th grade, there is 9th grade, there is 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. All are NCERT physics books only. But depending on your grade, that particular textbook would be applicable for you. So similarly, the Karma Shastras are bona fide, the Jnana Shastras are bona fide, the Yoga Shastras are bona fide, the Bhakti Shastras are bona fide. But depending on one's particular adhikar, one has to choose that particular Shastra. So therefore, to think that these Shastras are not relevant for anyone, that is Shruti Shastra Nanda. So one may say, oh, I never do Shruti Shastra Nanda. I have never criticized the scriptures. But internally, if we ask, what is your understanding of scriptures, then we will think Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, the Bhakti Shastras, that is what is our understanding. So sometimes in Mumbai, when you travel in a taxi or something, or a rickshaw, the taxi driver or the rickshaw driver, he shows his Brahmin thread and he says, "Hum bhi Brahman hai." We are also Brahmanas. We also study scriptures. We have also studied scriptures. And you ask them, what scriptures you have studied? And they say, Karma Kand. As soon as we hear Karma Kand, we immediately feel, oh, this is a bogus fellow. But that is wrong understanding. Because Karma Kanda is also created by Krishna only. So it is appropriate for those people with that level of faith, that flavor of faith. Therefore, we should understand and appreciate all the various kinds of scriptures and their practitioners also. Even though for our own personal practice, we might want to practice only the Bhakti Shastras, but we should never criticize the practitioners of other Shastras, and the Shastras themselves we should not criticize. So this is the understanding of Shruti Shastra Ninda. So first we will see how the Shabda Praman is superior to the other two prominent Pramanas. Even though the Shastras talk about 10 different Pramanas, or Pramana means a proof. So there are 10 different ways of attaining knowledge, but the 10 can be summarized into 3. They are called as Pratyaksha Praman, Anumana Praman and Shabda Praman. Pratyaksha Praman means seeing is believing. you see and believe, or you experience and believe, or you hear and believe. So what your senses are experiencing, with that you acquire knowledge. Another is, the second is Anuman Praman. Anuman Praman means inference or logic. It's just like, oh, I see that there is some smoke in the mountain, so that therefore I presume that there must have been some fire. So this is Anuman or inference. And Anuman is dependent on Purva Pratyaksha, the prior experiential knowledge. So he is able to come to such an inference because previously he had seen smoke being connected with fire. So therefore he has come to this conclusion. This is called as Anuman or inference. And the third is the Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman means acquiring knowledge from the bona fide scriptures and Guru Sishya Parampara. This is Shabda Praman. So how is Shabda Praman superior? So we say that Shabda means it includes the 4 Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, Itihasas, all of that. And because all of them emanate from the breathing of the Supreme Lord Krishna, therefore they are accepted as perfect final authority of knowledge. Particularly in the spiritual subject matters which cannot be acquired by the material senses. Atasri Krishna Namadi Nabaved Grahyam Indriyahi Sevon Mukehi Juhvadau Swayameva Spuratyadaha. Because of the nature of Krishna's name, form, qualities and pastimes, which are all transcendental, therefore our material senses cannot access the name, form, qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, one can attempt to understand them, at least theoretically, only through the scriptures, Shabda Praman. And by material logic and material intelligence we cannot understand. But the problem with Pratyaksha Praman is that human beings they have 4 faults. We all know this. Prabhupada writes this in the introduction to Ishopanishad book. First is Karana Patava. Karana Patava means limited perception. Our senses cannot perceive unlimitedly. Our eyes can perceive only to a particular distance, and our ears can hear only within a particular range of decibels and so on. If there are vibrations beyond that decibel, then we cannot, and if what we are seeing is trying to see, it is beyond the visible range, then we cannot see also. So therefore, our senses have very limited perception. And Brahma means we can get illusioned very easily. Because our senses have limited perception, we can see something, we may think something else. And sometimes, because we all have false ego and some vested interests, sometimes even though we know that what we have seen is different, in order to protect our false ego or our vested interest, we may say that, no, this is what I saw. This is called as Vipralipsa, a desire to cheat or a desire to report something other than what we have perceived through our senses. And the fourth is Pramada. Pramada is inattention of senses. Sometimes when we are not attentive, our eyes are seeing but nothing gets registered. Pashyan apina pashyati. He is seeing but not seeing. This is called as Pramada. So, in this way, Pratyaksha Praman or direct perception is not very reliable because of these 4 problems of Karana, Patava, Brahma, Vipralipsa and Pramada. So therefore, one cannot perceive anything beyond the material level of unconscious matter, and even perception of the unconscious matter is fraught with lot of imperfections. So therefore, and what then to speak of the spiritual realm? So spiritual realm, if we want to understand any subject matter or perceive any subject matter, it is unapproachable without the help of Krishna. Therefore, Krishna has given the 4 Vedas, which are essentially beyond the 4 faults. And by these alone can a man progress towards his spiritual goal. So only through the 4 Vedas can a person go beyond the realm of the senses and see what is there in the spiritual world, understand the spiritual subject matters. So therefore, the next theme that we'll see, so now in this way we started by understanding when we could criticize the scriptures, what is this criticism of scriptures. Then we saw the superiority of Shabda Praman over Pratyaksha Praman and Anuman Praman. And now the third theme that we will see is what are the contents of the scriptures. So even though the scriptures do talk about karma, jnana, yoga, etc., but a person who understands the essence of the scriptures, understands that the essential theme of the Shastras is actually bhakti and nothing other than that. All descriptions of karma, jnana, yoga is just to protect the consciousness of the person till a devotee comes and sows the seed of devotion within his heart. When he comes to bhakti, immediately he understands that he has to give up karma, jnana and yoga. Etavan sankhya yoga abhyam swadharma parinishtaya janmalabha parapumsam ante narayana smritihi. So only as long as a person does not understand the ultimate goal of life as to establish a loving relationship with Krishna, only till then there are many paths like karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, etc. But the moment he realizes that the ultimate goal of life is to establish a relationship, a loving relationship with Krishna, then at that time what happens? Ante. He puts a full stop to all the other practices, karma yoga, jnana yoga and ashtanga yoga, and eventually takes up to bhakti yoga. And this theme is recurring throughout Bhagavatam. Ajñayaiva gunandoshan mayadishtan apiswakan dharman santyajya yas sarvan mam bhajet satu sattama. So even though a devotee understands the benefits of practicing one's varnashram duties and the pitfalls of neglecting to perform one's varnashram duties, but still at the end of it, after understanding this, he still gives them up and practices pure devotional service because he understands the higher instruction of the Supreme Lord, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. And such a person, Krishna says to Uddhava that Satu Sattama, he is the best amongst all living entities. And even after discussing Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, Krishna in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, last verse, he establishes Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. He establishes a practicing bhakti yogi to be the topmost of all the yogis. So therefore, even though scriptures do talk about karma yoga, jnana yoga and ashtanga yoga, it is just to keep the living entities who have not received the seed of devotion piously engaged, so that they don't get severely deviated in the direction of sinful life. So in order to protect their consciousness reasonably, Krishna does describe karma yoga, jnana yoga and ashtanga yoga in the scriptures. But eventually the goal of Krishna compiling the scriptures is to only establish bhakti. Because Krishna says, Vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo. Through all the Vedas only I am to be known. And Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatvatah. Tato mam tatvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. That only by bhakti can one understand me. Bhaktyaham ekaya grahyah. Only by bhakti can one understand me. Again, this is Bhagavatam. Brahma Samhita says, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santas Sadaiva Vishaya Vilokayanti. Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He talks about how only those people whose eyes are anointed with the salve of love, salve of bhakti, only they can understand Krishna. Only they can see Krishna. So this theme is very consistent. Only by bhakti one can understand Krishna. And Krishna has clearly told that Vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo. The purpose of all the Vedas is to understand Krishna. So if the purpose of all the Vedas is to understand Krishna, and the only means of understanding Krishna is bhakti, therefore Vedas essentially establish only bhakti. So the Vedas are conclusively talking about bhakti only. Only to slowly elevate a person step by step, the Vedas seem to talk about karma, jnana, yoga and other such paths. But in reality, the Vedas actually speak only about bhakti. And the wise man will understand that the other descriptions of karma, jnana and yoga are just secondary and are worthless as independent processes. So independently, neither karma, jnana, yoga has any potency. Shemam na vindanti vinaya darpanam. We saw this. The Vedas stand as the authoritative guide and reference, and they prove 9 different topics. So what are the contents of the Vedas? 9 different topics. This is described as the Dashamula Tattva, the 10 essential truths, of which the first truth we have already seen is Shabda Praman is the topmost. The Vedas are the topmost Pramana for understanding transcendental subject matters. This we have already seen. And those Vedas, they essentially talk about these 9 subject matters, which can be divided into 3 parts: Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojan. The first 7 tattvas are Sambandha tattva, the 8th tattva is Abhideya tattva and the 9th tattva is Prayojan tattva. So Sambandha means what is the essential relationships, what is the essential knowledge that is needed to understand this subject matter. And Abhideya is the process and Prayojan is the goal that we are trying to attain by practicing this process. So what are these 10 tattvas? 7 Sambandha tattvas. What are they? First, there is one Supreme Lord Vishnu. That is the first understanding that the Vedas present. The second understanding is that this Lord Vishnu is Sarva Shaktiman. He is the possessor of all energies. This is the second conclusion of the Vedas. And the third is, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Matta parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya Mayi sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. Understand, my dear Arjuna, that there is no truth higher than me. And I am the one who is holding this whole universe, just like a thread holds a collection of pearls in the form of a necklace. Even though the thread cannot be seen, but it is the thread that is holding all the pearls. In the same way, we may not be able to perceive Krishna by our mundane senses, but invisibly he is holding this whole universe and he becomes the cause of the functioning of this whole universe. So, or aham sarvasya prabhavo mattas sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. So in this way, Krishna talks about that how he is the Sarva Shaktiman. And the purpose of such descriptions in the Vedas is so that a person can get devotionally disposed towards Krishna. He can develop devotion towards Krishna. Iti matva buddha. The intelligent person is that person who has understood this truth of Krishna's omnipotence, omniscience. And what does that knowledge of omnipotence and omniscience of Krishna do to that person? He says that bhava samanvita mam bhajante. He will worship me with great love and affection. So that is the second theme of the Shastras or the Vedas, which is the Lord is the possessor of all energies. The third of the Sambandha Tattva is Krishna is the fountainhead of all rasas and is situated in his dham where he eternally gives joy to the jivas. So while the Sarva Shaktiman Supreme Personality of Godhead exists in the material world in his three Paramatma Tattvas, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, Kshirodakashayi Vishnu and Karanodakashayi Vishnu, but the fountainhead of all these Purushavataras and Leela-avataras and Guna-avataras and Manvantara-avataras, all these avatars, the fountainhead of all of them, Krishna, he is situated in Goloka. Goloka eva nivasatya kilatma bhuto. Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. So he is situated in Goloka and he is engaged in loving pastimes with all his devotees. And with those devotees, he perfectly exchanges rasas, the 5 primary rasas and 7 secondary rasas. So therefore, the third conclusion of the Shastras is that the highest understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth is that he is not only the possessor of all energies, but he is the possessor of all sweetness. He is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. But this conclusion of the Shastras are little secret conclusions. Not everyone can access this secret conclusion of the Vedas. Then the fourth of the Sambandha Tattva is about the Jivas. So the first 3 Tattvas are about the Supreme Lord. The first Tattva being the Supreme Lord is one and that is Vishnu, and the second is he is Sarva Shaktiman, and the third is that he is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. So in this way the first 3 Tattvas are about the Supreme Lord. Then the next 3 Tattvas are about the Jivas. The Jivas are infinitesimal in size and infinite in number. Okay? But they are conscious living entities. So the basic understanding of the Jiva, Mamaivamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Manashashtani Indriyani Prakritistani Karshati. So this essential understanding of Jiva as a conscious particle, infinitesimal in size but infinite in number, is the fourth teaching of the Shastras, Vedas. The fifth teaching is about the conditioned souls, the Nitya Baddha Jivas. There are some Jivas who are eternally bound in this material world, being attracted by illusory pleasure. So these are the Nitya Baddha Jivas, the conditioned souls which live in this material world. Because we cannot trace out when this conditioning happened, therefore they are called as Nitya Baddha, eternally conditioned. But these Nitya Baddha living entities, by practice of bhakti, can become siddhas, sadhana siddhas. So this eternal is used in the sense of one cannot trace out the source of when this living entity got bound and conditioned to this material world. That we cannot trace out, but that does not mean that this binding of the living entity to this material world is eternal. In the sense, it is such a Nitya Baddha will ever remain a Nitya Baddha. It is not like that. So the word Nitya is used in a different sense here. The word Nitya or Sanatana can mean eternal in the sense no beginning and no end. But sometimes the word Nitya or Anadi or Sanatana can also be used in other senses. Like in this case, Nitya Baddha means you cannot trace out when he got conditioned and bound to this material world. But by practicing bhakti, he has a scope of getting out of this material world to become a Siddha. So that is the description of the Nitya Baddha living entities, is the fifth Tattva. And the sixth Tattva is about the Nitya Siddha living entities, the eternally liberated living entities who are the eternal associates of the Lord in the spiritual world. So this is the sixth Tattva. And the seventh and the last of the Sambandha Tattva is the Achinta Beda Bhed Tattva. How does the Lord relate with his energies? How does the Lord relate with the Jiva Tattva? How does the Lord relate with his Maya Tattva? And how does the Lord relate with his Kala Tattva? There are very There are many energies of the Supreme Lord. Parasa Shaktir Vividaiva Shruyate Swabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. There are many energies of the Lord, of which three primary energies are Jnana, Bala and Kriya. And of course there are Jiva Tattvas, there are Maya Tattva, and all these energies are there, and Krishna maintains a inconceivable oneness and difference with all these energies. He is simultaneously one with all these energies, at the same time different. And this is materially impossible and inconceivable in this material world. No person can be simultaneously one and different from his energies. He is either one with or different. But Krishna, in Krishna, all the contradictions are resolved. For him, it is not impossible to be simultaneously one with and different. This is inconceivable. This is inconceivable for us, but this is not inconceivable for Krishna. So this is the seventh and the last of the Sambandha Tattva. Then the eighth, which is the Abhideya Tattva, talks about what is the process of attaining success. Now that we have this seven Sambandha Gyan, three about the Supreme Lord, three about the Jivas, and one about the Lord's interaction with the three Tattvas, we have seen this. Now, that is the Achinta Beda Bed relationship of Krishna with the Jiva Tattva and the material world. Then the eighth is, what is the practice? What is the recommended practice? So he says that the process specifically mentioned for the Jiva in the Vedas is Navada Bhakti. So this is a very powerful presentation that he is making here. So the highest, even though the scriptures do talk about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, but nevertheless the scriptures actually in essence recommend only Navada Bhakti. This is the highest understanding of the Vedas. So we do not reject, we do not say that wherever it is recommending Karma, Jnana and Yoga, it is bogus scripture. We don't say like that. But one who understands the heart of the Vedas understands that ultimately the ultimate recommendation of the Vedas is only Bhakti, Navada Bhakti. And this Navada Bhakti is divided into two parts, Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. And of the 9 processes, hearing and chanting are the Shravanam and Kirtanam are the foremost, and that is the reason why the chanting of Om is glorified in the Vedas. And then what is the Prayojan? The 9th Tattva. The Prayojan is Prema Prayojan. The final goal or the constitutional platform of the Jivas is the activities of pure Bhakti, which is Prema. This is attained only by the mercy of Krishna. These are the basic principles for the guidance of the Jivas, which are denoted by the Vedas. So this is the contents of the Vedas. Contents of the scriptures are this Dashamula Tattva. The 10 essential truths, of which the first is Shabda Praman is the topmost, and then those Shabda Praman talks about 9 essential truths. 7 truths talking about the Sambandha, 1 truth about the Abhideya, and 1 truth about the Prayojan. So, therefore, those which do not accept these Vedic conclusions, they cause Shruti Shastra Ninda. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Harinam Chintamani, he talks about one of the main reasons for such inimical attitude towards the Shastras, he says, is actually the 6 systems of philosophy. Most of the 6 systems of philosophy, they draw from the Vedas, but they misinterpret the Vedic knowledge and come to wrong conclusions. So their conclusion is not the Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojan that we have mentioned. So they reject this Dashamula. they reject this Vedic Dashamula Tattva. They reject that these are the conclusions of the Vedas and they come to their own concocted, speculated conclusions. So starting with, so if one criticizes the Vedas, that is an offense to the holy name. Such a person is a low rascal because the ultimate conclusion, the scriptures actually glorify the holy name. Therefore, to criticize the scriptures is to criticize the holy name. In the history of India, there are 6 personalities who invented theories. And by their inventions, they simply brought themselves to no good end. He says that they have caused such a great damage to themselves and to others in this world. Jaimini is the Karma Mimamsa proponent, who says karma is ultimate. Even if there may be a personality called the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his role is just to see what is the karmic account of this person and accordingly give him karmic result. There is no other potency of the Supreme Lord. So this is the understanding of Jaimini, who proposes an almost impotent Lord who has no other potency but to be subservient to the karma of the jivas. This is improper understanding. Then there were atheistic philosophers like Charvak, the Buddha, Gautama Buddha. Even though Gautama Buddha is an incarnation, as we saw yesterday or the other day, his philosophy cannot accept it because basically he presented a tatkalika dharma or a temporary truth, ahimsa paramo dharma. Even though the Shastras say, Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje. Parodharma is actually bhakti, but because in the name of Vedas people were doing merciless slaughter of animals, so therefore he first came and rejected the Vedas and established ahimsa paramo dharma, just to bring them back to a sane life. So therefore, this was a tatkal dharma, this was an emergency dharma. But this cannot be accepted because he rejected the Vedas. And similarly, Dattatreya propounded Mayavad philosophy. So therefore, even though we may accept him as an incarnation, but we understand the purpose of these incarnations like Buddha and Dattatreya, which is essentially to bewilder the demoniac people who in the name of the Vedic scriptures were committing a lot of atrocious activities. All these philosophers are against the Vedas, sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly they are against the Vedas. Therefore, the wise man, knowing that belief in these philosophies makes one an offender, completely avoids them. And another philosophy he quotes is the Mayavad philosophy. And all these philosophies are not proper understanding of the Vedas, but they are distorted, perverted understanding of the Vedic conclusions. And actually this Mayavad is say, Mayavadam Asat Shastram Prachannam Bauddham Uchyate. It is covered Buddhism only. When we reject Buddhism because they do not accept the Vedas, then we may say, why do you reject Mayavad? Because they do accept the Vedas. But they do accept the Vedas, but they distort the meaning of the Vedas and present more or less this Buddhist understanding only in a perverted way by quoting the Vedas. So therefore we reject Mayavad understanding also. So therefore he took essentially the Buddhist understanding of Shunyavad and presented what is called as Mayavad by quoting verses from the Shastras only, but giving a very perverted meaning of the Shastras, by rejecting the direct meaning of the Shastras. So they say that actually they quote certain verses like the Shastras which say, oh, the sun rises from the sunrise mountain and it sets in the ocean. So they say, the sun, does it rise from a sunrise mountain? Does it set in the ocean? Do these statements have to be taken literally? Actually not. These statements are not literal. They are used in a way which can aid our actual perception and understanding of things. But they cannot be taken literally. So they say in the same way, none of the statements of the Shastras can be taken literally. Now this is stretching this a lot. There are most of the statements of the Shastras can be understood literally. They don't have to be understood metaphorically. You don't have to use a figure of speech to understand that. They are not spoken in terms of various figure of speech like simile, metaphor or alliterations, nothing like that. Most of the Shastric statements are direct. But the Mayavadis, by quoting these statements, these very rare statements which cannot be accepted literally, and they say that the whole Shastras have to be understood in an indirect way. But in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's conversation with Prakashananda Saraswati at Varanasi, he presented the hermeneutical principles. What are the principles based on which a Shastra can be commented upon, understood? He said the first principle of how you can interpret Shastra is that first you have to accept that the Shastras are Ishvara Vachana. They are directly spoken by the Supreme Lord. Therefore, you cannot accept some and reject some. This is the first teaching. You have to accept all, because the Mayavadis reject some of the statements of the Vedas by telling that Vyasadeva is mistaken here. Then the second teaching that he says is that the Shastric statements have to be primarily understood based on their direct meaning, Mukhya Vritti, and not Gauna Vritti. So this was the first teaching, the second teaching to Prakashananda Saraswati. But the Mayavadis reject this and they try to interpret everything in an indirect way. And if interpreted in an indirect way, they lose all their sane meanings. And you come to insane conclusions by that. So therefore, if one accepts these philosophies or are influenced by these philosophies, then they will start finding faults with bhakti. So if one takes the holy name while following any of these philosophies or understanding these philosophies, then it is an offense. Rather, the jiva should accept the direct meaning of the Vedas. So what we are discussing now is what are the different ways in which Shruti Shastra Ninda can be committed. Accepting these various philosophies which are essentially based on the Vedas, but giving perverted understanding, perverted meaning to these Vedic statements is actually criticism of scriptures. It is an offense to the scriptures, and therefore it is an offense to the holy name, because in essence the Shastras glorify the holy name. But if a devotee accepts the meaning of these Shastras coming in the proper Vaishnava Paramparas, then he can achieve prema by following these Shastras. So these are some of the themes that we have seen. We have few more themes to cover about this Shruti Shastra Ninda. We will continue this theme tomorrow. So thank you very much for your patient listening. Hoping to have your association tomorrow also. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Shri Madhurya Kadambini ki jai. Hare Krishna.